Hi everyone, this is Leanne and this is From the Heart. And today, after the episode that I did with Chandra, I wanted to do a how to prep for birth kind of. It's not teaching you, it's just saying where to get the information and what information to look for. Um, so, the first thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to repeat it throughout this episode, is the support that you build for yourself. And so what that looks like, it's also your care providers. Your care providers have such an impact. They have their own statistics. Do their statistics resonate with the care that you want? So just an example here, if you are someone who would prefer to not have a C-section, that is a statistic you can ask for. So if you have a care provider, when you go and meet them or at your next visit, even if you're term, you can always ask them these questions. So this is like you would ask them, what is their C-section rate? What is their team members' C-section rate? So the people that may be at your birth if your care provider is off call. And then what is the hospital's C-section rate? So that gives you information so that you can make the best decisions for yourself. If you're someone who wants to not have an epidural or have an epidural, those sorts of questions. If let's say you would prefer not to have an epidural and you know that your hospital's epidural rate is 80%, you know that there might be less support in having a birth that is without medication. And so maybe you'd want to get yourself a doula or, change hospital or, whatever, depending what the options are that you have, you can think, what is it that I want? One question that is like almost mandatory that you should ask would be like, what got you in obstetrics? Like, why are you catching babies? And then I really mandate, that you choose someone who is ridiculously passionate about catching babies. Catching babies, even though it's part of the medical world, it is the only thing in the medical world that is normal. Everything else is, surgery, medication, this, that, abnormality, this is not pathology. So this is the part where physicians and midwives and nurses get to be like, well, we get to do the fun part of, medicine. So make sure that they feel that way. Make sure that, and they might not speak to you in fluorescent lights or anything, but they should just radiate their love for baby catching at the very least, at the very, very, very least. So that's a question that I think everyone should ask their care provider. And then when you choose your baby catcher, that doesn't, even if you absolutely adore your baby catcher, you feel really drawn to them intuitively, you're like, yeah, that's the person that I need to get care from and have at my birth. Just make sure that you don't see them as an authority above you or as less than you or whatever. Like, there's no hierarchy in any of this. They are educators. See them as educators. This is what they do. They go to births regularly, once or twice a week. And so this is someone who can educate you about, what's upcoming and what your choices are and that kind of thing. So that's the first thing, support. Oh, and then the other thing is support that you get to choose from. So is it your partner that's going to be at your birth, your doula, your best friend, your sister, your mom? The people that you want at your birth, you definitely want them to have a nurturing quality to them. You want them to have a supportive quality to them. There's some people who want to be they want to be at the birth because they think that you owe them that. That's not the person that you want at your birth. You want the person that on the days when you're sick and you need to go to bed, okay, That's the person that you want at your birth, is the person who's going to take over everything, the person that's going to lend your hand even when they are tired. It's the person that's going to go the extra mile for you. It really is about you. And so choose that person. Choose that person that is going to empathize with you and be compassionate and hold you when it's hard, you know? So choose that person. And if you know that you don't have quite that person, maybe, consider a doula or think outside the box. Maybe it's your sister or the best friend, So support is a big thing. And it's a big thing, not just in labor, it's a big thing in life, Yeah. And then when it comes to the research and what the research says about prepping for birth, it's that when you're seeking education around birth, there's the studies show that really there should be a part of the class that is hands-on on teaching you, how to do, the things like the hip squeezes, the breathing, the pressure, the massage, those sorts of things. That's what boosts confidence in clients and in partners before the birth. So you definitely want that hands-on part before birth. And then there was another study that I thought was really interesting. They were comparing the regular prenatal education classes and mindfulness-based prenatal classes. When I was a midwife and I was doing my yoga teacher training in BC years ago, I used to tell everyone that my yin teacher, my yin yoga teacher, like that class and what her teachings would prep anyone for birth. So anyways, it's interesting now that there's a study that shows that people who have a foundation, that like you don't need to have a foundation before pregnancy, but just if they looked at people who had a moderate to high level of anxiety while they were pregnant, and then gave them the tools to incorporate mindfulness into their daily lives, not just on the mat. And then they compared the group that didn't have that, and people who had the mindfulness-based practices had less anxiety at birth and had less anxiety in the months following as well. So having your baby, the first few months of your baby being born. And so that is something that you can look into. It doesn't have to be prenatal classes. It could just be something that you decide to incorporate yourself. There are, meditations. There are meditations on YouTube everywhere. And so some of them will be on your show notes, in the show notes that I have here, of some meditations or people that you can look up. And what it is, what the researchers think it is that it's a teaching that helps being open rather than resistant to challenges in life. And having that in labor, it just reduces anxiety, basically. They weren't saying that it would be less painful, but they said that it reduces anxiety. But just from my point of view, if we have less anxiety in labor, we have less fear, we have less tension, and I would say that there is a potential for less pain as well. So there's that. So it's a coping mechanism, basically, is what mindfulness can teach people if we want to incorporate those teachings into our daily lives. And I'll put a link to an article about that study in the show notes. The other thing that the researchers noted was that there was a benefit to the community building in those types of prenatal classes, because they're not prenatal classes that are just like 2 weeks. They are prenatal classes that are kind of, you have to take them for a few weeks, and so you're building this relationship with other people. And then when we look at research just in general, community or quality relating, it's like the number one thing for our health, right? Having people that we care for gives us purpose. And having purpose gives us a reason to eat the broccoli, kind of, and like exercise and to do like and it's more than that. It's feeling supported makes that just elevates us even without getting to that broccoli, right? Or getting to the exercise. So that's something that we need to take ownership of, like our relationships and how, like what we do in those dynamics of the people that are around us. And either you can, manifest relationships in your life with new moms or whoever, your neighbors, better relationship with your sisters, like whatever it is. And create that for you. And there's all kinds of tools that we have and all kinds of opportunities that we have now with online and groups where people can meet just that way. People who are looking for the same things can meet that way. And then also there's just like these postpartum groups that people set up just so that parents can get out. Even the swim classes for babies is a really great place to meet people and connect and develop relationships with people who are at the same place in life. There's also that people don't have to be in the same place as life. My friends, so I don't have children, but my friends, like they call me sometimes and they're like, I just want to let you know that having an auntie for my children means so much to me. So like, so just, it doesn't have to be someone who's exactly in the same part of life, so intuitively where you want to go and who you want to develop those relationships with. With birth, there is also for some people a past of trauma, and the fear of having vaginal exams and that kind of thing. So if that's the case for you, speaking to a therapist about that would be a really good thing. And then somatically, like physically, moving through that. So pelvic floor physios are really great because it's not just the physical and the manipulation and the things like that they do. Pelvic floor physiotherapists also just spend time, and it can be completely external, doesn't have to be internal. And it can even help build physically, so not physically, but like emotionally with confidence, help you learn confidently to say no, or I don't like that, just by like practicing with their hand on your hands, basically. So pelvic floor physios, if you are, even if you don't have the trauma, but they do the manipulation of the pelvic floor. And so if there is a lack of tone, or if actually most of the time people, I think a physio can actually confirm that with you, but I'm assuming that most of the time there is there's too much tension in the pelvic floor. Don't quote me on that. And then sometimes there can be more tension on one side, which makes the baby kind of go like this, and babies have a harder time coming out what we call asynclitically rather than uniformly. Just because that's how the head kind of molds inside the pelvis. And so if you want to get kind of a tune-up that way before birth, a pelvic floor physiotherapist would be a good tool for you to learn about your body and learn some exercises that are specific to you and for your body and for your pregnancy. Prepare you for birth. honestly, I really do think that it could help prevent tearing and have a better labor to have a baby that's in a better position or having that body work, right? Another thing that I would say that is helpful to do before birth is to expand. So this is a word that Lacey Phillips coined, and what it is that is to show your subconscious that what you want does exist. Um, we live in a world where birth is seen as dramatic and an emergency, and so we need to do the opposite of that when we are pregnant, thinking about getting pregnant, or just even being able to get pregnant. So at the minute you turn 8 or 12 or whatever, whenever you get your period, it's really good to have these boundaries around the birth stories that we hear. To take them with a grain of salt if you do hear them, do see them on TV. The things that I see on TV are true. So so I just want to let you know that. Also, the stories that people can tell, because sometimes I'm there hearing a story and I was either, part of the birth team or the birth was debriefed with me, that kind of thing. And their story really, they often sometimes don't understand what happened to them at their birth. And the other thing is, depending on their personality, they can add flair to it. And of course, when we tell a story, it's so much nicer to say it with a flair and say, these things. And the people who have like the very non-fearful birth, the people who are really satisfied with their birth, those are the people that don't share their birth stories very much. And so I just want to let you know that those are most of the birth stories, and that now is the time to start looking for that. So places where you can expand is, so if you're gonna go look on Google and you're going to be visualizing a birth, you want to put the word positive birth story in your search, because whenever we look for things like that, positive is not what is most clicked on. And so just make sure that you look specifically for that. If you have a best friend who just delivered before you did and her birth wasn't what you want, then maybe it's just time to just set a boundary and say, right now it's not the time for me to listen. I will after my baby is born. The other place so I recommended this throughout my career to my clients. It was in May Gaskin's book. You just pick one of her books, and then half of the books that she has written have sections of birth stories and all kinds of births in there. There's one written in the 70s. She uses all kinds of, words that we don't use anymore, and it's funny. But it's just to get into that mindset of what birth really is, and kind of looking at it really realistically rather than dramatically. This is also a note to the stories that we hear when we are children really impact us, and how we feel and think about birth for the rest of our lives. And so your mom might have given you a really beautiful story that you're like, yeah, birth is great, or she may not have, and that will impact how your brain, what you're expecting for birth. So even if you have a very difficult birth, or a birth that it wasn't, your plan A, maybe not your plan B, you can always tell your child, like, yeah, like, I did have pain. That's the truth for the majority of people, not all people, but the majority at this point, with the way that we see birth and the way that we prepare for birth. I do personally think that could change to a little bit more people who feel that birth doesn't have to be painful, or they don't describe their birth to be painful. That's really important to have your support, to have that birth prep. And so, excuse me. So where was I going? So yes, and part of how we talk to our children about birth can help with that. So she's a doula, and so the way that she posted that, the way that her mom described birth when she was about 9 years old, she asked, "Mom, how does birth feel?" And the mom replied, "It's like having the biggest poop of your life." And that's like an answer that's appropriate for her age. She probably gave some more details. When I was 9 years old, I knew a good chunk about birth, because that's my life and has always been. But that's like a pretty good answer for the usual child. And so just like think about how you're going to want to describe your birth to your child when they're growing up. Yeah, so that's and one of the ways that you can, even if you have so my mom had forceps, she had oxytocin induction, she had no epidural, she was on her back, and I was OP, which means back labor. And she had all of that, no pain relief, and my mom still decided to say Leanne, I was just so uncomfortable at the end of pregnancy. I was so excited to meet you that I was ready for what labor was. And so that kind of thing, you'd be very honest with your child, but say it that way rather than a story that makes people want to really empathize with you. Just be careful who you're saying those stories to. If you do need empathy, talking to your therapist, talking to people who are done having their children, might be, the best people to go and talk to about that. And if you did have a birth that you consider traumatic, first of all, just like Chandra's birth, just because one birth was one way doesn't mean that your next birth is going to be the same. It never is the same. No birth is the same. And then, oh my gosh, I was going to say something. This is what happens when we speak to a computer. Anyhow, oh yeah, talking. Did I already say this? Talking to a therapist. Anyways, I forget if I did. Anyways, so using your coping mechanisms, journaling, asking your care provider questions about what happened so that you can really understand rationally later what has happened. Those are things that you can do for yourself that can help you kind of understand what happened and why there were decisions that were made. And it will make you feel empowered and maybe make decisions for your next pregnancy if you choose to have a next baby, maybe differently, or maybe do the exact same because it really helped you cope well. And I will say this, that if we make decisions based out of urgency and fear, those are the decisions that we're most likely going to regret. And decisions where we make them from an intuitive place, maybe we don't even know why. So when I was a midwife, I used to ask my clients, so why are you planning home birth? Why are you planning hospital birth? Why are you planning blah, blah, blah birth? And if they didn't have rationality, or if they had rationality as well, I would kind of dig a little deeper and just to feel where it was coming from. Because sometimes if we make a decision it's because of fear, then I needed to address that fear and make it realistic, is what I would say. Realistic doesn't mean overly positive. It just means, okay, yeah, it's true. Myself as well, I'm just going to tell you, I wouldn't want to have a C-section. However, there is a risk of that with being pregnant. And so what are the ways that we can prevent having a C-section? What are the reasons where we might need a C-section? Like, having those discussions. What are the things that we can do to make a C-section happier? And then the client can also tell you what in the event of a C-section, because I'm just using C-section as an example of something that you wouldn't want and there's fear behind. Whatever your reason is all, is the same thing for your reason, whatever you are fearful of. But then kind of thinking like that, what can I do to alleviate the fear of the thing I'm fearing? Yeah. So do that. Think of those things, discuss those things with your care provider, discuss those things with your helpful friends. Be discerning of who you share your choices with, because people will have opinions that may not serve you. And so anyway, so those are the things that I would say experts recommend, I recommend, and then what some of the research says around your prenatal classes and those sorts of things. There's probably research on pelvic floor physiotherapy, and there's probably some research around some of the things that I've said. Oh, there is research on the impact of fear and birth. There is definitely an impact when a client has fear on her birth. There is also definitely, whether or not there's research and impact when the care provider has fear and is coming into the room. So again, it's really important to make the decisions of who your care provider is prenatally. Really, really important. Okay, so I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a wonderful birth, because I'm assuming you're pregnant. A wonderful, buttery, and I would always say to my midwife clients, daytime birth. That's what I would always wish upon all the baby catchers. Yeah, I wish all those wonderful things, and they're definitely possible. Okay, like definitely possible. So have a good day, everyone.